this week is entitled, To Each According to His Faith. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. John, chapter 3, we read, Every one that doeth evil hateth the light, neither cometh to the light, lest his deeds should be reproved. But he that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God. It is a common experience shared by most people that when a person errs, he experiences a desire to hide that error from his conscience instead of holding it up for purification. Error clutches its misdeeds to itself and resists correction, though it is only in the state of purity that we can achieve perfect freedom. It requires an active will to offer that awareness up to the light and to hold it there until one's inner darkness is completely dissipated. For every state of consciousness has its own attractive power. And the more we allow that attraction to act upon us, the more we attract to ourselves the objective circumstances and experiences naturally to it. Our faith is the attractive power of our underlying state of consciousness. Goodness attracts goodness. It takes goodness even to see goodness. Evil attracts evil, and it takes evil to even see evil. That is, to take special note of its existence. Whatever there is in you of darkness or light, offer it up to the heights. In the supreme light alone will we find salvation. Accept nothing less in yourself as your lasting reality. As the Bhagavad Gita says in the 12th chapter, Cling thou to me, clasp me with heart and mind, so shalt thou dwell surely with me on high. But if thy thought droops from such height, if thou beest weak to set body and soul upon me constantly, despair not. Give me lower service. Seek to reach me, worshipping with steadfast will. And if thou canst not worship steadfastly, work for me. Toil in works pleasing to me. For he that laboreth right for love of me shall finally attain. But if in this thy faint heart fails, bring me thy failure. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
All right, I'd like to begin with a reading from Whispers from Eternity. This is a book of prayer poems by Paramahansa Yogananda. This is, Teach us not to follow the will of the wisp of false happiness. Through the long night of error we pursued the will of the wisp of false happiness. Gloom led only to deeper gloom. Our feet, struggling to follow the path of progress, often slipped into ruts and struggled through marshes of disillusionment. The deceiving Elmo's fire of passions lures many people to their doom. Thousands are sucked down into the bog of sense satiety. O divine friend, extinguish with thy breath this false light of destructive glee, which has so often misled thy children, headed for thy home. Light instead thy beacon of holy radiance, that every eager child pilgrim safely reach thy home. It's very nice to see you all, and the words of Krishna in that reading are so touching, because we can so often have this sense that we have this incredibly high standard to meet, and that we have to be perfect in all ways, and that we are so far short of that perfection. And this is something that, on the one hand, is very true, that we are striving to be infinite, we are striving to be divine, we are striving to be perfect, even as our Father who is in heaven is perfect. Krishna was teaching Arjuna to become like he was. Master said the Guru's job is to make you what he is, to bring out your divinity. It isn't as if he's converting you into something else, but he's bringing out that divine power, that divine consciousness which is already in us and just needs to be fully revealed. So it's true in a sense that we aren't, until we're there, we're not there, and that we're below that. And at the same time, there's no need to be upset, there's no need to be self-critical, there's no need to worry about it. We just simply are where we are. And in fact, there can be the thought that God is sitting around criticizing us, looking at this mistake we made, looking at that mistake, or we make a mistake and say, gosh, I hope he didn't see that one. And of course he saw it. He's in us. So, he's watching the show through our eyes. And he's even worse, thinking the thoughts through our brains. So you might be able to put on a pretty face and say, nobody knows what I'm thinking, but he does. Now, the thing about that is that there's just no reason, because God understands everything. And so he knows where we're coming from. Just as when you're dealing with a small child, if a little child, who's, 1 or 2 years old, spills something, you don't scream at him because he's not necessarily trying to spill the thing. He's just trying to work out the body, still trying to get to figure out how to use the darn thing. It's new after all. It's a fresh body, only 2 years old. It takes a while to get used to it. When you move into a new home, doesn't it take you a while to kind of feel like this is actually your home? We tend to think of the old home. And so children probably are trying to remember, no, I had an astral body that didn't have all this baggage with it. I could fly around, go through walls, and now I'm walking into walls and falling down. And so it takes time to get used to this new device. But on the other hand, so we have patience with the child because we can understand its reality from our perspective. And if it does something, whereas if an adult came and smacked your coffee out of your hand, you might have a different response. But similarly, with a slightly older child, now talking 4 or 5 years old, 6 years old, if they break a toy, and it's so sad because the doll's arm broke off and now we've got, a one-armed doll and it's kind of scary looking now and, it's just such a tragedy. We will, say, oh, we're so sorry, let's try to find the arm and see if we can reattach it and so on. There's something going on with my bangle. I'm not trying to reattach my arm here. Yeah. And so... But we honor the reality that the child is going through. We don't just say, it's a plastic toy, it is made of polycarbonate, it is not real. No, we honor because it's helpful for the child to care for something, actually. It's a good thing. Dolls and toys, it's good for children to develop that ability to care for something, even if it's just a toy. And so similarly, we... no, it's not such a big deal. And in worst case, when the child is asleep, we might run to the store and swap out the toys. Oh, look, all healed again, just for the sake of the child. But we know it's not such a big tragedy. So in the same way, when our house burns down, and we're all upset about it, I hope it doesn't happen to you, but I've known people who it has happened to. We are all upset, but God says, well, at least you're alive to be upset about it. And so I am sorry, and I'll kiss it and make it better. But, it's all these big tragedies that to us are so big are really nothing more than that doll being broken. If you say, no, you haven't heard my story yet. Yeah, okay, fine, but which lifetime are you talking about? You see? What about if in your last life you fell out of a boat and drowned, and it was such a big sad thing, you were about to get married and everybody was all upset, and then they framed your brother saying it was murder, and then he went to prison. That was a big problem. And now we're upset because taxes are due. We have to have a context here. So that's why I say we just don't realize necessarily how big a tragedy it is. You just have to say, well, let's try to get some perspective. But God has that perspective. Furthermore, God watches the heart. There's another translation or another commentary of this beautiful line, which Swamiji, even in the essence of the Bhagavad Gita book, he refers to this passage and he says, Sir Edward Arnold translated beautifully translated this as, "And if in this, even this your faint heart fails, bring me thy failure." And so on the one hand, it's so beautiful because God is saying, look, if all you have is failure, then give that to me. Don't hide it from me. Don't be ashamed. Don't be upset. Besides, I'm seeing it anyway. I've noted the failure. I know you have it in your pocket. You might as well give it to me. But how do we do that practically? If that's enough of an instruction right there. But Swamiji adds, he put it as Krishna saying, "Bring me thy intention." You see, Lord, I meant well. Lord, I'm trying to do good. Lord, I don't want to do this. Master said, even if you end up engaging in bad habits, say to yourself, I don't want this, this is not me. Inwardly resist. He said, I don't ask that you overcome temptation. I ask that you resist it. You see? Because sometimes, especially on the spiritual path, we start to learn what's right and what's wrong, and then we start discovering, oh my gosh, what have I been doing, and how does that stack up and score according to this new metric? And then we find out, I know now all these things are wrong, and yet I'm still doing them. And then we can get critical of ourselves because I know better. And so, yet I do it, so that must mean I'm terrible. And of course it's not true. It's just that there's still some momentum going from the past. But if we resist that, then we are pulling energy. We are putting the brakes on. We are slowing down that tendency, that habit, that pattern. And so that's why Master said you don't have to overcome, you just have to resist, because if you resist, then you will overcome. But if we just say, oh, it's terrible that I did this, then we're just emphasizing it. If we say, oh, I'm a sinner, Swamiji said that just gives us the excuse to keep on sinning. I'm a sinner after all. So, to keep up my title, let's find some sins to do. It's ridiculous. So, remember then that God has the whole picture and is just as patient with us as we are with a child, because that's very easy to relate to. Similarly, Swamiji said, especially regarding intention, for those of us on the spiritual path or anybody who's actively trying to live a better life, at least we're trying. He said, how many people in this world are even trying to do better? It's not to sort of compare us and them or criticize or anything like that, but honestly, I mean, it's just there's not so many. And he said, if God isn't pleased, he's going to have to pretty much adjust his expectations down to our level just to see, look, this is the best we've got going here. And so he understands that. Besides, he like I said, he is us. So there isn't even a I am watching you. I am you. I'm inside you. So we should have that trust. Why does error, as the reading said that Dharmini read, clutch its mistakes to itself? It's funny because it so often does do that. Why should it? If we make a mistake, why don't we just say, oh, I did it wrong. How do I do it right? Well, there's some obvious reasons. One is, at least with children, if they make a mistake and they get in trouble, or they make a mistake like in school and everybody laughs at them, which hurts, then they suddenly don't want their mistakes to be seen anymore. This is one reason why it's interesting often why children will lie. They lie because they're afraid. You see, this I had to tell myself because I did not like untruth in children when I was a school teacher, and there were many things I would put up with, even hitting, because it's like, learn to use your words, not your fist, and this kind of thing, for hitting the other children. They weren't hitting me, I wouldn't. But, but in terms of lying, the first time somebody lied right to my face, I was so incensed. How dare he lie to me? What does he think? I'm some kind of fool? And some 6-year-old kid and all this. So I knew that this was a problem because I was angry. And if I was angry, I should not be speaking to the child, because a little too much, flame will come out while I'm just saying, why don't you just, so I'd better get centered. And plus I needed to understand, because I knew I shouldn't be upset, because for children, as a teacher, you have to handle every situation. And if this is the child's situation, we have to handle it in a mature, wise way, not in a, impulsive way. And so I should mention, by the way, it's much easier to deal with children when you're the teacher as opposed to when you're the parent. So I'm not giving parenting advice, because it's very much more complex. And so I went to the wise teacher in the school. This was in Palo Alto, in Ananda's school there. And I said, the boy lies. And she said, you mean he has problems with the truth? I said, huh? Yes, he's a little bit challenged when it comes to telling the truth. I hadn't thought of that. Some people are challenged when it comes to writing in cursive. Some people are challenged in spelling. He's challenged when it comes to telling the truth. And I thought, now why should he be challenged? Because most children, especially when they're young, or if you get them at the right age, if you ask them something, they will tell you the God's honest truth, sometimes to the great embarrassment of the parents. They'll tell, oh yeah, Daddy says this is because, whatever. I won't even finish the sentence. And so, why would he hide? Why would he lie? And then I realized he must be afraid. And probably because he's gotten in trouble before. Maybe he's been hit before. So let me try to... then it allowed me to open my heart to the child, which is what I had to do, of course, in order to be able to work with him. So, God is the same way with us. He sees the whole thing, no matter what we've done. And believe me, everybody's done everything, and we've done everything. And as I've said before, as Swamiji's pointed out, if there's something that you see someone else doing that is just such a big mistake, whether it's committing a crime or keeping their family in turmoil through alcoholism or whatever, and you say, gosh, don't they just see what they're doing to everyone else and to themselves? Master said it's only because we ourselves have done that already in the past. That's why we can see its end so clearly, because we've been at the end. And that's also why it doesn't attract us, why we don't have a taste for it, because we have already satiated our taste many, many times. And so that's why that's an easy way, therefore, not to judge others, but to feel compassion. And to say, I have walked a mile in your shoes. I don't quite remember it, but I must have, because I'm not feeling inclined to walk a mile in that same direction now. And so, the task the universe sets squarely on our shoulders, as Swamiji writes in The New Path, is understanding ourselves and getting free. And so, it's interesting how the reading also says every state of consciousness has its own attractive power. You must remember this. Our thoughts are not entirely our own. Especially as you grow on the spiritual path, you become more sensitive to the thoughts of people around you, which seems at first to mean that I'm more affected by the thoughts and feelings of people around me. But it's not true. We are more aware of the effect of these thoughts and feelings that they've been having on us the whole time. In fact, in one of his books, Swamiji wrote, the principal goal on the spiritual path is to overcome the influence of other people's minds. It's interesting. And if that seems unfair, that's their job too. They have to overcome the influence of our mind. So it ends up being fair. But the point is, we are constantly, non-verbally. I mean, you could say verbally, yeah, you should meet my uncle. Oh my God, am I affected by his mind? Sure, that's one thing. But I'm talking about non-verbally. And even just the thoughts of people around in general. Master said if you see people walking on the street, most inside their heads, mostly the thoughts will be on rupees only. You'll see Gandhiji everywhere, but it's just Gandhiji in different colors and mostly purple. So, in the 2,000 rupee, no, okay, never mind. All right, so the whole thing is that thought pervades, and before we know it, we're thinking, yeah, money, definitely, that's the only thing. And so that's why satsang is so important, to be with other like-minded, spiritually minded souls. It strengthens us in two ways. It's not just that, oh, we're so vulnerable, and so when we're around positive people, we suck up their positivity, and that helps us to be positive. No. The spiritual path and this path is to help to make well people better. You see, it takes strong people and makes them stronger. Or as I heard Haridasji put it once recently, for people who are gasping for air, this path helps you get above the surface of the ocean of Maya to get that air, because you're already at the surface and it lifts you up further. But for people who are deep in the ocean, happily enjoying, it's better to wait until they're ready for air, until they're wanting air. Otherwise, don't bother them. Because this progression has to take its own course. And if we artificially push someone up, then, they'll just as quickly sink back down until they have their own strength. Same is true with us. That's why God doesn't pull us up any farther than we want to go. Not farther than we can go. Because we can go all the way, but farther than we want to go. That's the difference. And so that's what we should work on, the willingness, the putting yourself in states of consciousness that are positive. Again, knowing how much other influences affect you. Of course, there are protections against them, and if you've taken the Raja Yoga class, we know about the magnetism exercises, and there's all kinds of things. Meditation is one of the greatest protections, but satsang is equal, I would say, certainly praised equally in the scriptures as a great force. We need this reinforcement. We need it every day. We need it every week, because we get it and then we slowly start to get covered over again, and then we need it again. That's just how it goes. Someone described on the spiritual path, they said we need CPR, constant process of re-inspiration. It's a constant process of getting re-inspired, rededicated. That's why we attend ceremonies and things over and over again, to renew our vows, to go deeper in them, and to really start every day as a new incarnation without forgetting everything in between. Just think about it. Today you were born, if you know Kriya, you were born knowing Kriya. That's a great thing, great way to start an incarnation. But also, Lahiri Mahashaya said every breath can be a new incarnation. And this is the way we should approach life. So, when we make mistakes, just be open about it. It's already happened. And in Swamiji said it's great news, because now we found something to work on. It's been there anyway. It's been there all the time, and probably visible to a lot more people than we care to admit. But now we have finally seen it. And so, as I said, every state of consciousness has its own attractive power. I went through a period of illness recently, and what was interesting to me was during the illness, I felt, which was a little longer than the normal sort of illnesses that I have, I felt a sense of peace at one point. And I thought, now why would I feel peace? It wasn't peace like rest in peace. It wasn't that kind of peace. But I felt a calmness. I felt I began to say, well, why do I feel this? Well, behind the peace, or with the peace, I felt an inwardness. I felt that very much my energy, my consciousness was inward. This is a natural thing that can happen during illness. Our physical energy is limited, the body's going through whatever it needs to, and sometimes we can, or we automatically do. In fact, the trend is to withdraw into ourselves. Now, interestingly, that's the same thing we try to do on the spiritual path. Through meditation, through chanting, through keeping silence, through reading spiritual books, through seclusion, we are trying to withdraw into ourselves. And so illness, in a way, it has some spiritual benefit that way if it drives us inward. Again, we can't do as much with the body. We have to be a little more careful with our energy, with whatever energy we do have. Also, with illness, often comes which I was feeling too, a certain level of detachment. Because all the sort of pleasures like, I would love to have 75 mudras and so on, can't have them. Can't even have one. Can't even look at them. And so why? Because remember, things that give us pleasure only do so because we give them the energy to then please us. And so when you don't have any energy, you can't give it to the mudra or the ice cream or the Mysore pak or whatever to then give you. How do you know? Because someone says, here you go, fresh amul, and you say, get it away, I can't handle it. Just why? Because we somehow know that would take energy from me. And so we end up eating, feasts of, what is it called? What is it? Kanji, thank you. A kanji feast. Oh, that's what I'm in the mood for. And so, anyway, but you have a little bit of that. It's like, I'm so full, wow, and all these different things. Because that's about the level we're on. Now, of course, if anybody has enough kanji, they will get very detached and want to withdraw from life. So, I'm not putting it that way. I'm just saying, with illness, we become more detached. And so, again, which is something we're trying to develop in the spiritual path too. Of course, the danger is that detachment can then be directed downward towards negation of life, withdrawing from life, and we're not supposed to do that. On the spiritual path, the detachment is directed upward. I'm not so caught up in the joys of these outer things because I'm feeling so much joy inside. And I'm not so worried about whether this thing works out or that thing works out because I'm already happy. So I'm not waiting for that thing to make me happy because I am happy. That's where the detachment comes from. It doesn't come from there's no joy in life, why seek it? It's there's so much joy in my heart that why should I bother about, what the weather is and what the temperature is? It's hot, but it's April. This is when it gets hot. It's sort of like, all our grumpiness starts to increase April, May, and then it starts to go down. It's just the season. So the other thing that I came upon in all of this was that like I said, this illness, this driving us within ourselves. This is another way to look at exhalation, because sometimes we explain inhalation is when we like something or when we're affirming life, energy is rising up the spine, and then exhalation is when we don't like something or when we are sort of negating life, and then it can start to be a little confusing because that means I only want to inhale. I only want to like and affirm life, and then nothing, and then again, and then until finally pop. And so how do we look at the exhalation in a spiritual way, in a positive way rather, instead of just a negative way? And Swamiji has often made the point that really that exhalation is when we withdraw into ourselves. So we inhale, we offer our energy up to God, say, and then we exhale, receiving His blessings into ourselves, or we, again, rest, come back to rest within ourselves at our center. You see? So that's the balancing. You can think of it as upward and then inward. Because I could say outward and inward, but we don't really want to be outward. could say upward and downward, but we don't want to be downward, so upward and inward is sort of the nice, one nice way to feel that, if that resonates for you. And so this is just true of the exhalation in life. He also says that this is the benefit of illness and disasters and other things in life, because when we have a big disappointment or a big illness or something, we tend to come back to rest within ourselves. Sometimes that's the only point. Sometimes illness is burning off bad karma. And in some cases, it's even burning off karma that if the illness was prematurely removed, the karma would not be burned off. There's a story of this that Swamiji told of a saint he knew who cured someone too soon at the pressuring of the family, the saint's family members. And the man, just as soon as he got well, ran off to the bad side of town and made it worse side of town. He went in with glee and did all kinds of bad things, left the family, everything. That illness was keeping him in check. It was burning off that karma and keeping him safe and driving him inward. And yet when that was prematurely plucked, then he had to go out still. So of course the people who had urged her, I'm sure, regretted their pressuring her. However, this doesn't mean we should seek illness. This doesn't mean that if we have illness or we have other problems like that, as I said, the danger is the detachment can go downward. Well, if it is the Lord's will to take me, He will take me. If it is my time to go, I will go. And to have sort of a casual attitude about whether we get well, even whether we live or not, that is not correct, Master said. Master said even no matter how much you are ill, even to the last moment of life, and the last moment of life means the next moment is death. That's it. Even to that last moment, we should fight for life. Isn't that interesting? Because he might say, well, at the last moment you can say, okay, Purim, I'm ready to go. And of course, once you're gone, once Master, you see him and he takes your hand, do go. But before that, he said, fight for life. Why? Because you will carry that life-affirming thought into the next life. But if you resist or let go, then you'll have that life-negating thought in the next life. You see, because it just keeps on going. So end on a high note so you can start on the right note in the next life. So never... You can't always give advice to people who are dying, because you know how things are. We don't want to hear advice from anybody unless they've been through what we're going through. So to people who are dying, you can't give any advice unless you've died already. So that brings up interesting philosophical implications, but we'll leave them aside. So the point is for ourselves, practice now. No, when I die, then I will fight for life. No. Practice now in anything. A setback, a professional setback, a family setback, a scary adventure that we're going on, that we fight for life, say yes to life. Practice now. And if you are really sort of feeling the life force slipping away or whatever, really take heart, especially if you're on the path seriously, if you're a disciple, if you're a Kriyaban, or if you're wanting to be these things. Fight also to serve the Guru. Fight also to make the best out of this life, to take all the opportunity you have and use it to the utmost. Because who wants to go through LKG again? Who wants to take the 12th standard exams again? So rather than start over, let's fight for everything now. And Master wrote a letter on this point. This is Sister Gyanamata's book. These is a collection of her letters. She was his most advanced woman disciple. And she had helped him very much. At the end of her life, she prayed for liberation. He said, you already have that. And, so she was beyond liberated and so on. And she helped him a lot spiritually by helping others. He said this many times. And he was always he always praised her, and he was always very loving to her. But in this particular case, she was very ill, and she was basically saying it may just be time for me to leave the body. And very ill means very ill. I mean, I won't go into the extent of the ravages of her body, but she went through things that just, even Master said he saw her and felt, I just need to let her go, but it's not time yet. But in this case, she was feeling, maybe this body is just done. And so this is what he wrote to her, and take these words to heart. Dear sister, you have always depended on me for guidance, so I write this, as I feel you need me now more than all other times. All the devotion, wisdom, faith that you matchlessly acquired are being tested now by God. Look how the soldiers are suffering in World War II, which was happening at the time, and how Christ suffered on the cross, and how Ramakrishna suffered with the most painful of all human diseases. Christ never forgot the Father. Ramakrishna never prayed for healing or relief. You, who are so highly advanced, must now use all your spiritual acquirements, that before my eyes you pass this test of God. You are an example to all. So do not be overpowered by suffering or have self-pity, but smile away all your troubles. Many years ago I begged your life from God, so do not throw away what God gave you by wishing to give up your body. To wish to die is to evade the examination of the transcendental soul as to what it has learned from its experiences with the painful flesh. You must finish all the lessons that God wants you to study in this school of life. So smile, and remember, we all want you to live and be of service to God, to me, and to all who are so much benefited by your contact. Do not tie my hands by negative thoughts, but cooperate and wish to live and be of service to this work as long as a drop of blood remains in your veins. My faith in you is ever unshaken. I deeply feel the impact of your test, but no matter how severe your suffering is, you can endure, as others who had even more severe tests with their bodies, day and night in horrible pain. So be thankful to Him who is the maker of our lives. Do not wish to throw away before your time comes what He has given you. Remember what Draupadi prayed to Krishna, Lord, I care not what pain or test of punishment you give me, but do not test me with forgetfulness of thy love. And this is what I pray for you, that you ever remember and love God and forget the body. Draw closer to the Divine Mother, even if she beats you with pain. As befits your name, keep your jnana, wisdom's light, ever burning during the darkness of this test, with deepest love and blessings and prayers that you soon become well. I remain very sincerely yours, Paramhansa Yogananda. And so there are two thoughts to keep in mind, many thoughts, but one of them is, do not tie my hands by negative thoughts. You see? Isn't it interesting how we can stop Master? Master is all-powerful. He's an avatar. He's a guru. We've given him our lives, and yet we can stop him. We can defeat him by negative thoughts. As he said, do not tie my hands. Because negative thoughts means I don't want help. Don't come in. And so then he won't. So he's saying, I'm trying to help. I want to help. So help me to help you with positive thoughts. You see? And so the other thing that just occurred to me as I was reading this, smile away all your troubles, he says. Now how can we do that? Well, I remembered once when Swamiji wrote a letter to Dharmini and me about something else, but he mentioned in the letter, I have been very sick lately. And he went on to describe some of his symptoms, which were rather dramatic. And then he said, in a way it's been refreshing because I had forgotten what it was like to be really ill. And so we had to kind of meditate on that one, just like, wow. But it was such a thrilling thought. It wasn't something that I could match, and I can't say I even matched it this time, But to just hear him, just cheerfully say, yeah, I forgot what it was like to be ill, so I got reminded. Why get so worried about it, so upset? He found a way to have fun with it. He was always finding ways to have fun with it. His body went through a lot of suffering, and there were times where he felt it keenly. As he did say, this is happening. But also, Swamiji was appropriate. And in fact, this is one of the things we learn to be on the spiritual path, appropriate. As I said, you don't say to the child, if they break the toy, that's just plastic, it has no meaning. In fact, all is Maya, even you are Maya. That's inappropriate. Somebody loses a relative and we say, well, the ego's cage is broken, but the soul flies on. If that will help them, then say it. Otherwise, say, I'm so sorry. Remember, when some people died, Master wept. He later said, I see them in the beyond. We had a conversation, They weren't gone at all from his vision, the way we feel. But he still wept. Maybe he wept for the people around him, for their sake, who were missing them. I don't know, but he was always appropriate. Swamiji said, in fact, that was one of the things that won him when he read Autobiography of a Yogi for the first time, how Master's perfect response in every situation. So whereas it was perfect for Swamiji to say, I'd forgotten what it was like to be very ill, there was a time when he was also ill, and I was inappropriate. Because he had been very ill, and I don't know if I was thinking of this time or another, and I wrote to him and I said, oh, dear Swamiji, about something else, and I said, I'm sorry you haven't been feeling well. Because of course, he's been very ill, but I don't want to necessarily affirm the reality of the illness. And after all, he's so far above the body and so on. That's fine when it comes from him. But in my efforts to sort of be appropriate and sort of positive thinking, I said, I'm sorry that you haven't been feeling well. And he wrote back to the letter and he said, Dear Dharmarajan, I wonder if you've heard, I've had double pneumonia. That's a little more than not quite feeling well. And then he went on to answer that it was not for me to make light or to minimize the thing. And so we're praying and all the things wrote back. So very apologetic. So in these ways we learn. We won't get it right the first time, that's fine. But the idea is after the first smack, to learn so that there isn't a second. This is how God trains us too, through others. So anyway, keep all of these things in mind. And above all, just say, God, good, bad, or indifferent, whether I get it all right or wrong, whether I'm a topper or a bottomer in the class, just let me out, because I want to graduate and be free. God bless you.